Hey, welcome back to the Food Forest. Today I've got a product for you. This is a garden planter and it is from somebody I love. It's my sister-in-law Sherry over at Gardening in the North. Now she put a lot of work into this gardening planter and I want to show it to you because we're actually going to use one this year as well. I think it's a fantastic idea. For those of you who don't know the channel that well, I plant a little bit like a drunken squirrel. I'm all about chaos and gardening in really unorganized ways. I think it's because my work is super organized. However, a lot of people sometimes ask me questions like, what varieties do you plant for annuals? Can you do more annual gardening stuff? That's not really my thing. I actually am transitioning away from annuals and trying to find perennial options so I can put it in my food forest. People garden in very, very diverse ways, a huge spectrum. I'm definitely on the ecosystem building side of things. I want to make a forest here and I want to make a resilient ecosystem that also just happens to grow food, kind of like a landscaping. So I tend to focus on, varieties of trees and bushes and herbs and perennials and soil science and microbiology and all of those things. Sherry, however, at Gardening in the North, she really focuses on organization and annual gardens. This is just something that I don't really necessarily do that much. Now, we actually have started to rub off on each other a little bit. She's starting a food forest, and a couple years ago we started an annual bed, like a dedicated annual bed. I used to just put my tomatoes around my fruit trees and just go find them. What I found was I often didn't find them. I often forgot about them, and I would only find out next spring when I saw, 8 garlics popping out of the same spot because I forgot to harvest my garlic because I lost it. How can you possibly find all this stuff that I've planted here? So what we're going to do this year is start getting a little more organized, especially on the annual side in the annual garden bed. But then I'm also going to use this book to help plan out some of my food forest ideas. So let's go through this book and I'll show you what's inside of it. But if you are the kind of person who loves talking about different varieties of tomatoes, peppers, plants, different annuals, definitely go check out Sherry at Gardening in the North. I'll leave a link below because this is like her cup of tea. She's so good at this stuff, and also things like cooking and canning and preserving. She's fantastic at this. This book is like a Sherry thing. This is exactly the way that she works. So let's look at what's in it. By the way, can I just say how awesome this looks? I just think this is so gorgeous of a book. Now the idea is that you're just basically going to go and make a whole bunch of notes. And she's got a whole bunch of things. For example, for garden planting, here's a bunch of companion planting. And the thing that I really like about it, there's a whole bunch in here where she's pre-populated some information, but she's also left some blank areas because we're going to grow 10, 20, 50, 100 different things. And it's really good to know not only what things did well in terms of what the common wisdom is, but what things actually did well for you on your property. So this is an area you can add notes in. Now imagine if you had, a decade worth of these books that you just kept for every single year where you had all that information. It would be very, very valuable. So here's a section on garden layouts, and there's just a bunch of these. So these are just grids. It's kind of like a journal. So I'm going to use this to actually plant out my gardens, and I like to design in like unit cells. So for example, if this is the south and this is the north, I want to start planting all my tall stuff back here so that the stuff in the south doesn't grow tall and block the sun out from the northern stuff. Now there's a bunch of pages of this, so you can actually make a whole bunch of sketches and brainstorms until you come up with your final plan. So some of you might really like growing in rows, and you put a row of tomatoes and a row of squash. For me, I would put in, a big block 4x4 squash, maybe some 1x1 marigolds and garlic and onions around it, tomatoes. I would also think in 3D space, so I'd want the tomatoes at the front, maybe peppers down in front of it, and then sprawling squash in the front, at the very, very front here. Okay, so the next thing that we come to is a seasonal starting plan. So once you design your garden, now you can figure out where you want to put things in the season plan. So there's seed starting things, and she's got a couple in here, but the thing is she didn't want to fill this in for everyone on when to plant it because it's going to be different for everybody. So what you should really do is go on Farmer's Almanac. You can put in your actual location, and that'll give you seed starting dates and direct sowing dates for everything that you can grow, and it'll be specific for your climate. And then you can put the notes in here so that you don't have to do that every single year. You can just look back. And you can also put notes on, did that actually work out, or should you maybe delay things a little bit? So there's also transplanting guide. For example, we don't start our squash indoors. We actually just direct sow them. I also just direct sow carrots and beets, things that will get up and growing really quickly that I don't necessarily need to start indoors. So you can fill those out, and then you can actually take notes for the next year, whether that worked or not. Maybe you actually do need to start your beets indoors. So here's a big open blank space on items that you need to start the season, whether that's potting mix or compost, things like that. You can write down and almost have like a little checklist, but there's actually a better checklist later on for specifically that. And then we've got the garden budget. There's a couple pages here for garden budget, how much things cost. This is really good for if you're going to be tracking the actual financials of your garden, and I definitely recommend that you do, because it gives you insight into things that are actually worth growing, worth your time and worth your money. For example, you can get a bag of carrots really cheap. Maybe that's not economical for you to grow. You'd be more economical planting greens like lettuces and kales. So you can track all that information down, and imagine if you had a decade's worth of information. You can really start to hone your garden into things that not only are more nutritious than the things in the store, but also are worth your time and your money. Okay, so this is the nice seasonal checklist that I really like. I have this currently on sticky notes kind of all throughout the house, on little notes on my phone. And it'd be really, really handy to do because, for example, there's like a winter, spring, a summer, and a fall. The fall checklist, I would put planting my garlic out. Last fall, I completely forgot about it. So we pulled our garlic sometime around June or July, and then it sits in my shed drying out, and then I actually will plant it in the fall. However, last year I forgot, so I have a whole bunch of garlic just sitting in my fall, and it kind of rotted and it's no good anymore. It would be really handy if I had a little checklist. Hey dummy, go plant your garlic. Now thankfully I have a bunch of garlic planting coming up all over the place from areas that I missed because I plant like a drunken squirrel. So sometimes I guess being a little disorganized can be handy, but in general it's probably better to be organized. This will be one of the areas of the book that I heavily use. This can be things just like in the wintertime, top up the carbon in your chicken run. And then in the spring, go pull that out, mix it with compost, maybe do a batch of biochar. You can put a little to-do list. And actually, if you want to do your to-do list, the very next thing is a little to-do list. So this is actually really handy as well. You can do things like, hey, run a batch of biochar, get my compost turned, get the old compost mixed into a big pile, start a new compost bin, go get a load of wood chips, stuff like that. Maybe the most important time-sensitive things to put in here are like reminders on when to go and buy seeds and plants, and then when to start your seeds as well and transplant them. So now we've got a seed inventory. I'm sure a lot of people are like me and we just save all the seeds that we can. I have a big box of seeds and I completely forget about the things that I have in there. This will actually help you remember all the different seeds that you have, and that way you're not rifling through your box looking for stuff. You can kind of just look and see what you have available and keep this updated. Okay, I really like this section. It's garden staples. So this is like, if you had a certain variety of tomato that you loved, write that down because you will forget it. You very well could forget it, especially if it's some variety that it's not a well-known variety. So this is areas you can write down your absolute favorite plants. And again, imagine if you had 10 of these logbooks through the year that you could look back on, things that you liked at one point, maybe you try them again. And then here's a seed wish list. This is really good. I'm sure a lot of you are like me in this and you watch gardening videos all year long. Sometimes I'll see things that other people are planting and I'll think, okay, I want to grow that. Or I'll listen to a podcast, top 10 veggies that we're growing this year, and I'll hear something that I've never heard of before, and I'll want to write it down. and I'll absolutely forget about it. This is a really good place to centralize all that information, and that way you don't forget, and you actually go out and try to find the things that you were curious about. Okay, seed starting tracker. This is really good for specifically when you start your seeds. First off, where are they? Where are the varieties? But mostly when I pot up, I start them in really small little seed trays, and then I pot them up into Dixie cups. And when I do that, I lose any kind of labeling or tracking. I try to like label the Dixie cups, but sometimes it gets washed out. This is really good for actually tracking down. You know, maybe you put all of one variety of tomatoes in a certain color of Dixie cup, or you put a piece of tape around it and not tape around something else. What I found is when I put tape around stuff and then I write on it, just the watering and the humidity will actually wash the marker away. So not great. I've learned that over the couple years. So having this written down in a book like this would have been really, really handy. All the red Dixie cups are black Cherokee tomatoes. You're probably not going to mis-ID, you know, a tomato for a pepper plant. But Sherry's growing 25 varieties of tomatoes this year. So when you're done your seed starting and you actually want to go plant out in the garden, you might pick your 4 favorite of each variety, the 4 strongest plants of each variety. And if you actually knew which varieties of tomatoes were in different cups, it would be really handy. Last year we just kind of guessed. We planted out the best plants, but we got a whole lot of cherry tomatoes, which wasn't bad, but we didn't get a lot of black Crims and black Cherokees and Bonnie Bests that we planted. So it would have been really nice to know what varieties of tomatoes they were, and having written it down here probably would have been really handy last year. So there's a whole bunch of pages of this as well. Then there's a direct sowing checklist. This is really good for writing down, you know, the date that you planted it, when you expect it to germinate, how many seedlings. Probably even like replace one of these with the location that you planted them. Maybe you label your rows in your garden so you know which varieties are where, that kind of thing. Okay, pest and disease log. This is one of the best reasons, I think, for having a book like this. You can write down, you know, each year, what time, when did you have a problem. That way, in future years, when you're looking at what varieties do you want to grow of a certain plant, you can look at your pest and disease log and then get varieties that are resistant to that. I'll give you an example in my food forest. We have a whole bunch of peaches, and we get peach leaf curl really bad here. Veteran peach, I've noticed, has been the worst for getting the peach leaf curl. So I would write a note of that, and then if I'm ever replacing my peaches in the future, I know not to get veteran instead of relying on carrying it around in my head. You can only carry around so many things, no matter how good your memory is. I forget things all the time, and I kind of have like a photographic memory, but I do forget things all the time, so maybe I don't have a photographic memory. But regardless, it would be really handy to look back in a log about all the pests and diseases that you had, and then in the future, you can actually plan. Another thing you could do, for example, for pests, is if you have a whole bunch of a certain insect that's destroying your crops, you can then look up on the internet what insects eat those pests, and then what plants attract those insects. And then you can put that into your seed starting guide and plant out herbs and flowers to attract the predators of the pests that have historically been bad for your garden. So fantastic, fantastic section here. And that's the best thing about this book, is there's a bunch of really good sections, and it's all in one book. And there's a bunch of pages of this, as well as big blank spaces for just general notes. Okay, fertilizer amendments. This is really good. You know, it doesn't have to be NPK fertilizers or Miracle-Gro. This can be just literally adding compost after a rain. When did you do that? It can be, did you do a Jadam liquid natural fertilizer? Did you do other liquid fertilizers like comfrey tea, a nettle tea, a manure tea, that kind of thing. And then you can also write down, you know, when you started your brew, how long you want to do it, when the end date is. That way you kind of, you know, can track everything and know, hey, it's June 1st, my nettle tea is probably ready. I'll go foliar apply it. I'll make a note here, applied on what date, and that way you can spread it out. You can also write down blooming times of different plants so you can plan out when you're going to actually do your fertilizers. So for example, you want to have a high phosphorus or potassium application of something like you would get in a water hyacinth liquid fertilizer, and you want to do that just before flowering and fruit set. So you can actually make notes on when you do that and when you should do it in the future. fantastic. And imagine having that information years down the road that you can look back on. It'd be great. And there's a couple pages of this as well. Okay, harvest tracker. So now we're getting into the fun stuff. Actually, how much pounds of food did you actually pull out? What date? When did you harvest? So that's handy also, but you know, how much did you actually pull out? This will give you information combined with the income and budget tracker on, is it worth growing potatoes for you? Compare that to a bag of potatoes in the store. Is it worth growing carrots? Maybe instead you're growing other things that are more expensive, and you can compare how much you actually are pulling out of your garden. That'll also tell you what things grow well in your area. Maybe you shouldn't focus on growing something that everyone grows if it doesn't grow well for you specifically. So maybe, for example, tomatoes don't do great for you, but you find out that peppers do really well. So you can also create trade groups with different social friend groups, and maybe you grow the peppers and someone else grows the tomatoes, and then you actually barter in exchange. Okay, there's a seed saving chart here. So the different variety of veggie, fruit, and herb. Are they true seeds? Are they heirloom seeds? Or, you know, what generation of seeds are they? And then any notes about them. And then we get into just general notes. So this is intended to be a journal to track and store your actual learned knowledge in one consolidated space. So, you know, a list of things that I want for next season, things that I need for next season. What did my garden teach me this season? This is kind of areas you can just freeform a whole bunch of different things. New varieties that you want to try out next year. And then this one's really good, weather notes. So this can be really handy for tracking, you know, when is your actual first frost date? When is your actual last frost date? When did things bloom? This is really good for that. So for example, we have a whole bunch of varieties of apples and pears and peaches, and a lot of these things need to be blooming at the same time as other varieties so that you get cross-pollination. So you can write down all the varieties of your peaches, for example, and the date that they were in bloom, and that way next year when you're actually looking to fill in more space in your food forest, you can look for a variety of peach or apple or pear that blooms at the perfect time as the whole in your blooming gradient across the season for you. You can also do this for herbs and flowers, for example. You can write down when did your daffodils flower, your lilies, your tulips, any kind of flowers, as well as herbs like your rosemary, your thyme, your oregano. When are these things flowering? And then you can actually fill in holes down the road. You can pick different plants to fill in holes so that the pollinators always have food. That way the pollinators are going to be establishing themselves and naturalizing on your land, so that next season they're not hatching 3 kilometers away and flying to your property. They're actually just naturalized on your land because they've had food all year long. So this is a really good area on bloom times, varieties of when they bloom, when are you getting your rains, when are you getting floods, when are you getting your snows and your frosts, your high temperatures, your low temperatures. You know, write all this stuff down, because getting information for the city that you live in is one thing. Getting information for your specific area is another. For example, my land is actually quite a bit higher than the surrounding lands around me. So a lot of our weather data, when I look up my township, it's not really accurate. We actually stay cold much longer in the spring, and we'll get snows way later than even just 2 streets down from us. So writing that stuff down is really, really handy. I go back in my YouTube videos to get that information, but it just depends if I had a video in that time. It would have been really nice to write this down every single year and have one of these books every single year that I could actually look back on and data mine. And then there's just a whole bunch of pages here for notes at the end. Anything that didn't fit in one of these little categories, there's a space to put it. So that's it. This is the book. I think it's really cool. I think it's really good looking. It's going to look a lot nicer on my counter, kitchen counter, than my current black notepad that looks all squirrely and ratty. I'll leave a link in the video description below for anyone who wants to pick these up. It's very affordable. The link is an affiliate link, so if you do any of your shopping and you start with that link, no matter what you buy, it'll actually support my channel. If you buy one of these, it'll obviously support Sherry's channel over at Gardening in the North. I can say I know what her markup is on this book, and I told her that she should actually raise her markup because it's very, very modest. But for you, that means that you're getting it basically at cost. So check this out. And definitely consider subscribing to Sherry over at Gardening in the North, especially if you like any of this kind of topic on organization, variety selection, you know, any of the really annual garden heavy based stuff, cooking based stuff, dehydration and storing stuff. She's just so fantastic for that. She's also moving to a new property, so that'll be really fun to watch her do that. Build all her new garden beds, plant all of her new food forests, and it'll be really fun to watch her this season. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to watch all her stuff. So thanks for watching. Consider supporting her, and I'll see you on the next one. My next video is going to be about propagating. The video is already done and prepared. We're just waiting on the sponsorship to okay it. But we went around and basically propagated a bunch of free plants out of the inventory of the food forest. So, you know, that is my thing. That is the thing that I just love. I love getting free stuff. I love that I started this food forest because now I have this inventory of plants that I can literally photocopy. It seems so weird that I can go and essentially create free stuff out of stuff that already exists. It's just bananas to me, but I guess that's nature, right? Nature is very replicative. So if you like that, if you want to learn how to create free plants out of existing plants, then check out my next video. It should be out fairly shortly. I'll see you on the next one.